Hey everybody, it's Marking Bad, and I know this is going to be a terrible fucking idea because it's 3 fucking a.m. and, well, to be honest, I'm a little drunk. But we're going to hit the high points of the idiocy that is the uproar over the Google Memo. And I'm very specifically calling it the Google Memo because the idiots that are calling it the Google Manifesto, it's not a fucking manifesto. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a great number of things you can call that particular memo, but it is not a manifesto. In fact, I'm going to do us all a favor here. I'm going to go and dig up I actually have a folder for definitions because that's how fucking absurd people are. And I'm going to pull up the definition of manifesto. I'm going to share that. So give me just a moment here, and we're going to drag that up. Oh, look, here's the screen share button. Let's just look at what a manifesto is. A public declaration of policy and aims, especially when issued before an election by a political party or candidate. This is the sort of thing that you see, for instance, with Elliot Rogers, or Roger, whichever it is, the Unabomber. This would, in fact, be the sort of thing that you saw the Pulse shooter decree during the middle of a 911 call. No part of the Google Memo qualifies as a manifesto. It's also been referred to as a screed. It is not a screed. It's not particularly ranty. What you're about to encounter, ladies and gentlemen, probably going to verge on being a little ranty because I'm kind of a dick and I'm drunk and it's late. And sorry, this is what's going to fucking happen. So here you go. Manifesto, right? Right. All right. So let's get down to the bones of it. We have the actual file, the memo, complete with all of its various citations. So you have this statement that has been appended. Reply to public response and misrepresentation. I value diversity and inclusion, am not denying that sexism exists, do not endorse using stereotypes. While addressing the gap in representation in the population, we need to look at population-level differences in distributions. If we can't have an honest discussion about this, then we can never truly solve the problem. Psychological safety is built on mutual respect and acceptance, but unfortunately our culture of shaming and misrepresentation is disrespectful and unaccepting of anyone outside its echo chamber. Despite what the public response seems to have been, I have gotten many personal responses from fellow Googlers expressing their gratitude for bringing up these very important issues, which they agree with, but would never have had the courage to say or defend because of our shaming culture and the possibility of being fired. This needs to change. Update: the individual responsible for this memo was fired by Google. Let's just examine what the CEO of Google has to say about people expressing themselves. Let me say that we strongly support the right of Googlers to express themselves, and much of what was in that memo is fair to debate, regardless of whether a majority of Googlers disagree with it. The gentleman in question, responsible for the memo, has in fact been fired. Let's take a look at some of the fucking hot takes. We have people literally comparing this memo to, well, not sure what he's comparing it to, but he's trying to start with, there's a supposition that somebody's going to break the law. Let's move on to what he next. Oh, no, sorry, wrong one. Let me just, why in the fuck is it not letting me move down? Because I'm an idiot. Oh, yeah. He compares it to Mein Kampf and the protocols of the elders of Zion. We have people that are asking for clarification about what's expressed in myself actually asking for clarification of what's been expressed in the Google memo. And people legitimately and seriously suggesting that a demand for clarification, or in this case, a request, is somehow indicative of sexual predation. We have, oh, look at this. 4 scientists responding. So we have a professor of social psychology at Rutgers University. That sounds like it's somebody that kind of knows what the fuck they're talking about. Main points are neither the left nor the right gets diversity completely right. The social science evidence on implicit and explicit bias has been wildly oversold. It's far weaker than people seem to realize. Google has, perhaps unintentionally, created an authoritarian atmosphere which has stifled discussions of these issues by stigmatizing anyone who disagrees as a bigot and instituted authoritarian policies of reverse discrimination. 4, the policies and atmosphere systematically ignore biological, cognitive, educational, and social science research on the nature and sources of individual and group differences. And this person specifically points out they cannot speak to the atmosphere at Google, but give that the author gets everything else right. I am pretty confident he is right about that too. 2, it is painful. It is a painfully familiar atmosphere, one that is a lot like academia. So you have people, John Scalzi's just kind of a shithead, like directly demanding, has Google fired the sexist shitball? If we'd like to go back, I can go through this, but there's nothing in here that is inherently sexist. Nothing. So there's nothing. Oh, look, calling it a screed. Anti-diversity. It's not anti-diversity. It's demanding that there not be an unnecessarily egregious stifling of what's being discussed. That's it. That's legitimately it, folks. He's asking that we go, hey, look, if we look at population-wide sexual differences in career fields, we can directly examine the fact that, well, lots of women seem to like jobs that have a huge social element to them. You see lots of nurses, lots of psychologists, things like that. Daycare workers, teachers. I mean, just 4 examples that come to mind. When you look at men, you see that there is a consistent and fairly regular set of men that are interested in engineering and math and construction. I mean, I'm in construction. I've been in it for 20 years. I'm surely not the only one. But there are people out there that seem to think that this is entirely associated with acculturation, and it's not. There are not only cross-cultural studies, but there are cross-species studies. If you want, I'll go get them. I'm not going to pound on those like a drum, but they do exist. There are studies on bonobos. There are studies on various other primates that show that male primate infants go for toys that make noise and do things, and female primate infants go for dolls and similar objects that are these studies are sort of indicative of the fact that, well, holy shit, boys and girls instinctively at a neonatal level have some kind of inherent instinct towards doing things, specific things. Boys like things they can build, things that make noises. Girls like things that they can cuddle and be social with. Not good, not bad, really indifferent. It's just a thing that is. Yes, you're going to argue that's technically a naturalistic fallacy. It's not. Simply, that's what we got going on, folks. Hate to tell you. So let's look at this. Oh, shit. Gender personalities and gender difference in personalities across the 10 aspects of the Big Five. So these are the 10 subcategories of the Big Five that I'm sure you're all familiar with Jordan Peterson speaking of. So, wow, and they quote Bill Cosby. That kind of sucks. Not something I really want in there. He's still kind of controversial. Still allegations that he raped people. If the Big Five constituted the level of the personality hierarchy immediately above the facets, only one factor should be necessary to explain the shared variance of the facets within a given Big Five domain. However, a large behavioral genetics study revealed that 2 distinct factors were necessary to account for the shared genetic variance among the facets within each domain. Okay, I'm not in STEM, folks. Not even gonna claim to be. I'm a high school dropout. I build shit for a living. I like to climb things and make a lot of noise. But what that's saying is that there's some pretty serious nuance here. That's what I'm getting out of that. Oh, look, gender differences in big five personality traits. Let's, neuroticism. Neuroticism describes the tendency to experience negative emotion and related processes in response to perceived threat and punishment. These include anxiety, depression, anger, self-consciousness, and emotional lability. I'm not sure what lability is. Women have been found to score higher than men on neuroticism as measured at the big five trait level. Gotcha. Agreeableness comprises traits relating to altruism, such as empathy and kindness. Agreeableness involves the tendency towards cooperation, maintenance of social harmony, and consideration of the concerns of others, as opposed to exploitation or victimization of others. Women consistently score higher than men on agreeableness and related measures, such as tender-mindedness. Conscientiousness describes traits related to self-discipline, organization, and the control of impulses, and appears to reflect the ability to exert self-control in order to follow rules or maintain goal pursuit. Women scored somewhat higher than men on some facets of conscientiousness, such as order, dutifulness, and self-discipline. These differences, however, are not consistent across cultures, and no significant gender differences have been found in the conscientiousness at the big five level, at the big five trait level. We got one there so far, that is not displaying significant differential between the genders, between the sexes. Extroversion reflects sociability, assertiveness, and positive emotionality, all of which have been linked to sensitivity to rewards, whereas gender differences are small in the overall domain of extroversion, where women typically scoring higher. The small effect size could be due to the existence of gender differences in different directions at the facet level. Women tend to score higher than men on warmth, gregariousness, and positive emotions, whereas men score higher than women on assertiveness and excitement seeking. That would be the whole, like, guys tend to be potentially risk seekers and women tend not to be. Openness intellect reflects imagination, creativity, intellectual curiosity, and appreciation of aesthetic experiences. Broadly, openness and intellect relates to the ability and interest in attending to and processing complex stimuli. No significant gender differences are typically found on openness intellect at the domain level, likely due to the divergent content of the trait. For example, women have been found to score higher than men on facets of aesthetics and feelings, whereas men tend to score higher on the ideas facet. That would be the whole men like abstract things, women like fairly concrete things that are related to sociability. So, I mean, like, there's fairly clear evidence here. Now let's start to get into the hot takes. Let's look at the hot takes here. So we've got a person directly comparing the Google memo to the École Polytechnique massacre in 1989. This is where people are going with this. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a comparison of a very visibly mentally disturbed man who, yes, described himself as anti-feminist. He was also raised, at least in part, by a horrifically violent Muslim father. So let's not forget that, folks. That could be a contributing factor. I don't know. The man's dead. I can't really tell you. But there are people comparing the Google memo to a mass murder. That's not even the best of it. You have people comparing it to MRA, bored, intellectually vapid bullshit. We have this woman. This woman actually I was an idiot. I didn't screenshot this. This woman legitimately believes that the vitriol, it's vitriolic, the Google memo. There's nothing vitriolic about it. I'm more vitriolic right now than the Google memo is. Okay, like this is what we have as a response to, there were biological, neurological, hormonal, and a variety of differences between men and women. This is the response that we see, ladies and gentlemen. If men and women are so vastly and intensely similar, then I present to you the possibility that Sweden has something fucking wrong with it. It's arguably the most, ignoring the various social problems they appear to have due to EU immigration policies, they appear to be the most egalitarian country on the planet. And yet Sweden has exaggerated gender-specific stereotypes in various fields. Engineers are almost overwhelmingly men. Nurses are almost overwhelmingly women, as an example, in Sweden. And you would think that in a highly gender egalitarian society that would not be the case, that there would be something substantially closer to gender equality and representation in those fields specifically. And yet it's not the case. Women in Sweden like to be nurses, and they like to be teachers, they like to be psychologists. And men in Sweden, they like to be engineers, and they like to be construction workers, and they like to be fishermen. Well, how in the fuck is that happening if men and women are so goddamn similar? I mean, would you like better than that? If you give me a moment, I believe I can find the gentleman that compared it to Mein Kampf. I shit you not. There has been somebody that did not read the Google memo compared it to Mein Kampf. Not even kidding, folks. That is exactly how fucking absurd things are right now concerning this particular event, this social event. It's going to take me a minute to find it, folks. I apologize. I should have had this up first. I clearly understand that. It's yeah, it's fucking absurd, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure how anybody can reasonably compare the Google memo to anything resembling Mein Kampf. But you know what? That is literally the hottest take that's gone on. I'm not even sure how it's controversial that men and women are different. Like why are we even arguing this, ladies and gentlemen? They are. It's women happen to have certain neurochemical differences that make them appreciate chocolate more. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's just, if I make my girlfriend angry, I'm going to buy her fucking chocolate. If she wants to make me happy, she's probably going to go get me beer. Like, that's why is that even an argument? Come on, work with me, folks. This is fucking absurd. Still looking, folks. I'm still looking. Struggling to find the goddamn tweet. Like, I'm not kidding you. There was somebody that legitimately decided that it was important to compare the Google memo to Mein Kampf. No, apparently I'm not going to find it. Hang on. I'm going to go through Twitter to see if I can track it down. I might have to struggle with that because yeah, there's all sorts of stupid shit happening on Twitter, largely because Google has decided to shit the bed here. I mean, yeah, it's going to take me a sec, folks. I know, I suck at this shit. Oh, wait. Here we go, folks. Pull this over. Give me, God damn it. There we go. Just bring this into what I'm showing you, folks. This is legitimately how absurd things are. I haven't read the memo. I'm not going to read the memo. I'm not going to read any more of your tweets, okay? That's what we start with, okay? I haven't read Mein Kampf or the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is how absurd these people are. This is what is going on when somebody has a PhD in biology, no less, has the audacity to say, well, there's some differences between men and women. Not good, not bad. But if we want to encourage women to be part of tech, we need to potentially make tech more social. And they bring up partnered coding, things like that. I don't know if that'd work. I mean, it's not my specialty, but it doesn't sound unreasonable. But Google already employs 20% of their computer sciences division is women, which is 2% above the national average for graduates of computer sciences, ladies and gentlemen. 18% of graduates of computer sciences are women. 20% of Google employees that are computer sciences graduates are women. Google is already doing better than the national fucking average. But somehow there's a diversity problem? Well, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get the gulags going. Let us force the ladies to be computer scientists and computer engineers and software engineers. Brianna Wu, would you like to perhaps take a stance on this? Because you've already come out and explained exactly how absurd this is and how you believe that there are people that don't understand what it's like to suffer through a lifetime of discrimination based on your gender. Brianna, you spent some portion of your life at least externally identifiable as male, and you have since gone through a transition process, and you are now functioning and presenting as a woman. There is certainly a period during your life where you were not exposed to sexism for being a woman. There's no systematic oppression that occurred during that period. So, Brianna, you sit the fuck down, because nobody's even sure that you're actually a software engineer. There are so many things you say that even a layman like me goes, what? Are you out of your fucking mind? But this is what we get, folks. This is what happens. I'm on the fucking left, okay? Like to think of myself as pretty liberal. I do not compare biological studies and demonstrable biological differences to be the equivalent of Mein Kampf or the protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'm not even sure what the protocols of the Elders of Zion are. It sounds like if you're going to slam it up right beside Mein Kampf, probably not something I'm particularly inclined to go and hunt up and compare things to, unless they're legitimately calling for the extermination of people, which Mein Kampf did. You asinine fuck. I mean, Mr. Nick B. Morgan, you are aware that having particularly offensive opinions is apparently something that will cause you to be prone to being fired. Well, you've got your name attached to this particularly probably unpopular opinion. And if you were to suffer economic distress because of it, I don't approve of that, but it might just fucking happen. And I do apologize if it does. I don't think you deserve it. I think you're a shithead, but you don't deserve to lose your job. But you clearly think that people that are going to cite scientific data should lose their fucking job. You fucking dolt. Jesus goddamn Christ. How is this fucking reasonable? I mean, let's go back to what the four people that are in support of this says. Let's go double check which guy. Okay, so we're still on Lee Jussim. This essay may not get everything 100% right, but it is certainly not a rant. And it stands in sharp contrast to most of the comments, which are little more than snarky modern slurs. The arrogance of most of the commenters reflects exactly the type of smug, self-appointed superiority that has led to widespread resentment of the left among reasonable people. To the extent that such views correspond to those at Google, they vindicate the essayist's claim about the authoritarian and repressive atmosphere there. Even the response by Google's new VP in charge of diversity simply ignores all of the author's arguments and vacuously affirms Google's commitment to diversity. All right, so let's move on to the next gentleman. David P. Schmidt, bachelor's degree and a PhD in personality psychology from the University of Michigan. Probably not a dummy, folks. Probably much smarter than me. A Google employee recently shared a memo that referenced some of my scholarly research on psychological sex differences, e.g. personality traits, mate preferences, status seeking. Alongside other evidence, the employee argued, in part, that this research indicates affirmative action policies based on biological sex are misguided. Maybe, maybe not. So we're seeing somebody that is legitimately saying, there may be grounds to argue that affirmative action based entirely on heritable characteristics may not be ideal. Not saying it's bad, not saying it's good. Just there's grounds to argue both directions. So think it's really important to discuss this topic scientifically, keeping an open mind and using informed skepticism when evaluating claims about evidence. In the case of personality traits, evidence that men and women may have different average levels of certain traits is rather strong. For instance, sex differences in negative emotionality are universal across cultures, developmentally emerge across all cultures at exactly the same time, are linked to diagnosed, not self-reported mental health issues, appear rooted in sex differences in neurology, gene activation, and hormones, are larger in more gender egalitarian nations, and so forth. This is literally what I was describing when I suggested that in Sweden, if men and women are so fucking similar, we should have 50-50 male and female nurses, 50-50 male and female engineers. Not fucking shocking, folks. Jeffrey Miller is an evolutionary psychology professor at the University of New Mexico. This gentleman actually, it's Primal Polly, I believe, on Twitter. So, good guy to follow. He's very interesting. Oh, to have women deal with explaining the many things wrong with the anti-diversity Google memo would only validate it. That's bullshit. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. It's demonstrable, reproducible data. Nothing wrong with it. Oh, look. When the memo went viral, thousands of journalists and bloggers transformed themselves overnight from not understanding evolutionary psychology to all claiming enough expertise to criticize the whole scientific literature on biological sex differences. For what it's worth, I think that almost all of the Google memo's empirical claims are scientifically accurate. Moreover, they're stated quite carefully and dispassionately. Its key claims about sex differences are especially well supported by large volumes of research across species, cultures, and history. I know a little bit about sex differences research. On the topic of evolution and human sexuality, I've taught for 28 years, written 4 books and over 100 academic publications, given 190 talks, reviewed papers for over 50 journals, and mentored 11 PhD students. So a little bit of a appeal to authority there, but I'm going to guess that this person is well suited to judge the viability of the scientific data presented in the Google memo. So whoever the memo's author is, he has obviously read a fair amount about these topics. Graded fairly, his memo would get at least an A- in any master's level psychology course. It is consistent with the scientific state of the art on sex differences. Blank slate gender feminism is advocacy rather than scientist. No gender feminist I've met has ever been able to give a coherent answer to the answer, what empirical findings could convince you that psychological sex differences evolved? So, what's he saying here? Take a step back from the memo controversy to highlight a paradox at the heart of equality and diversity dogma that dominates American corporate life. The memo doesn't address this paradox directly, but I think it's implicit in the author's critique of Google's diversity programs. This dogma relies on 2 core assumptions. The human sexes and races have exactly the same minds with a precisely identical distribution of traits, aptitudes, interests, and motivations. Therefore, any inequalities of outcome in hiring and promotion must be due to systemic sexism and racism. Also, the human sexes and races have such radically different minds, backgrounds, perspectives, and insights that companies must increase their demographic diversity in order to be competitive, and any lack of demographic diversity must be due to short-sighted management that favors groupthink. Here's the irony, folks. To suggest that we are all the same and that we must all be the same, that we must, in fact, march in ideological lockstep is to demand groupthink. That's actually what current diversity policies demand, is that we operate according to a prescribed set of groupthink, and we operate via monolithic structures that are attributable to race, sex, sexuality, and a variety of other heritable characteristics. That is exactly what you see when you see some retard that goes, "Oh my God, white people." Which white people? Which ones? Can you point out? Am I a white person? Because I'm pretty sure if we go through my ethnic background, pretty sure that I don't qualify as white. But thank you for taking an interest in my ethnic background. That's really fantastic. I'm not sure what relevance that has to whether or not my opinion is good, bad, indifferent, or absolutely fucking absurd. Thank you for playing, though. Am I supposed to make some assessment of the validity of your opinion based on whatever characteristics, heritable or otherwise, that I perceive about you? Because if that's the case, you're not really going to like me, because I'm going to start to be a grade A asshole in a heartbeat. White people do not get a pass. Black people do not get a pass. Women do not get a pass. Men don't get a pass. Queer people don't get a pass. None of them get a pass. You know who gets a pass? People that do some fucking research. If you can't do some research, you're an asshole. And I'm going to mock you. And I'm going to pummel you with fucking citations because you're an asshole that is wrong. 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 Stop it. That is literally what we are seeing right now. You have to be diverse, because all of these different groups have all of these different amazing experiences that we should bring in. Sure, people have different experiences. Bring them in. See what the fuck that does for you. I'm sure that different experiences will contribute positively. That is not a problem. You know what? I know people that are going to bring amazing stories, and they're going to make my life a little better. They're going to maybe give me some fundamental grasp of something outside of my own experience. That does not mean I'm just randomly going to hire them because they have an innie or an outie, or they're black or they're white or they're purple or they're fucking polka dotted or what the fuck ever. None of that is relevant. Can you do the job? Can you do the job and entertain me with stories? That would be pretty fucking cool. My job is boring. I climb, I make monkey noises, I build fucking scaffolds. Entertain the shit out of me. Absolutely. Can't do the work? Get the fuck out. I'll buy you boots and you can come prove whether or not you can. Yeah, here's a really good point, folks. In theory, according to men and women being exactly the same, a 100% female team would function exactly the same as a 50-50% team, which would function exactly the same as a 100% male team. That's really key, folks. In theory, if men and women are equally capable because of trait distribution and because of the personal interests that are relevant to trait distribution, then there should be 50-50 representation in computer sciences and engineering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And men and women should be competent to produce the exact same outcomes. I mean, that's just basic logic. Men and women are the same. Men and women are the same. A woman should be able to stand up next to me at the next urinal. She should be able to piss exactly as far as I do. Men and women are the same, right? That's where we're going, right? Clearly, that's the case. And if that's not the case, then why in the fuck are we going on about this? But I mean, we clearly have to keep going on about this. I mean, even Lacey Green's fucking tucked into this going, well, but it's sexist. No, it's not. It's not sexist. Saying that men and women are different is not sexist. It's just saying that they're different. It's not assigning a value to those differences. You have to assign a value to the differences between the sexes or between ethnic groups to be sexist or to be racist. You have to be assigning a difference between homosexuals and heterosexuals, or trans people and cis people, to be homophobic or transphobic. Like, I'm a fucking high school dropout, ladies and gentlemen. What I do for a living is build shit. This is not complex fucking logic. I'm not trying to be a prescriptivist fuck. I'm not trying to be an asshole about this, but we have definitions so that we can ease our communication. If I say the apple is red, you understand that I am referring to a spherical fruit that comes from a specific kind of tree and that it has a specific color. We use those grunts and those noises to be able to adequately communicate. And you guys are fucking this up. I'm not sure who you people are, but there are people out there that are insistent on blurring all of the definitions and all of the lines, insisting that perfect equality is readily available. It's not. Sorry. I understand that, you know what? I'm not expecting a person with no legs to climb a scaffold with me. I'm not expecting a person with no arms to swing a fucking hammer. I'm not equal to those people. Not when it comes to building a scaffold. Clearly far superior to them. I'm not being brachiophobic, not being bipedophobic because one of those people doesn't have legs and one of those people doesn't have arms. I'm just saying I can do things they can't. Doesn't mean that I'm better than them at all things or inherently better than them in any substantive way. It means that you're all a bunch of dolts. Let's get to the final point. Deborah W. So is a Toronto-based science writer who has a PhD in sexual neuroscience from the University of York. Her dissertation used 4 types of neuroimaging, including structural and functional MRI, to investigate brain differences associated with sexual orientation, paraphilias, or unusual sexual interests. We call those kinks and fetishes usually, and hypersexuality. She's written for Globe and Mail, Playboy, and LA Times, among other things, apparently. She finds nothing in the memo offensive or sexist. She found it to be a well-thought-out document asking for greater tolerances for differences in opinion and treating people as individuals instead of based on group membership. This is exactly what I mentioned. There is this assumption that because that I am going to be characterized as white, regardless of the reality, that I am going to, well, according to Tariq Nasheed, I'm at a minimum, a white supremacist supporter, or somehow I'm going to be a white supremacist. I'm not actually white by any sort of ethnic background differentiation you could come up with. I'm not even sure how Tariq proposes to deal with that shit. I'm not sure if he wants the one-drop method that the KKK likes, or maybe Casta Sangre like the Spanish conquistadors liked. I'm sure he'll never answer me because he had me blocked. He blocked me for quoting Martin Luther King, in fact. Apparently that's a white supremacist tactic, quoting Martin Luther King. That's common hallmark of white supremacy. But yeah, there's this assumption that group membership is somehow an overwhelming contributor to the opinions of people. I mean, this is what you see when you notice that there are people that will screech at Black African Americans or Latino people that have voted for Trump. You're a race traitor. You're an Uncle Tom. You're a coon. You're this, that, and the other. That is, they will say those things. This assumption that your visible heritable characteristics are somehow indicative of your political opinions or your personal outlook. It's fucking asinine. It's absurd. Within the field of neuroscience, sex differences between men and women, or women and men, sorry, when it comes to brain structure and function and associated differences in personality and occupational preferences are understood to be true because the evidence for them, thousands of studies, is strong. This is not information that's considered controversial or up for debate. If you tried to argue otherwise or for purely social influences, you'd be laughed at. I think, like, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're done. Differences are not inherently supportive of sexism or stratifying opportunities based on sex, only because a group of individuals have chosen to interpret them that way and subsequently deny the science around them that we have to have this conversation at a public level. This, going back to Lacey Green, a tweet she made, I want to say October of last year, where she very, very strongly suggested that there was a substantial portion of the US population that was legitimately, virulently anti-science. I commented on this. I pointed out that there are groups that will absolutely rabidly deny that domestic violence is sort of a 50-50 game when you look at both genders, or that, sexual violence is not nearly the, oh my God, men do it all the time thing that feminists will present. And there's huge swaths of science that both the left and the right just completely want to ignore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here is a great fucking example of shit that the far left is completely happy ignoring. I mean, if you'd like, somebody tweet me later. I will go and find you that tweet of I'm trying to remember what online magazine it was. I want to say it was Salon. Salon said men and women have no neurological differences. And then the same day, they had a fucking article that said, this is what happens to men's brains when they fire guns. No mention of what happens to women's brains. But apparently, men can fire guns and get stiffies, and women don't have that. But men and women are totally the same. Clear it up? No, it's not clear and obvious. Are you out of your fucking minds? Jesus goddamn Christ. You're all a bunch of fucking lunatics. Holy shit. Some of these ideas have been published in neuroscientific journals despite having faulty study methodology because they've been deemed socially pleasing and progressive. As a result, there's so much misinformation out there that people genuinely don't know what to believe. No matter how controversial it is or how great the pushback, I believe it's important to speak out, because if we can't discuss scientific truths, where does that leave us? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I have anything more to say. I think Dr. Deborah Woe has adequately summed up the problem with the Google memo. We're not even allowed to talk about reproducible scientific data anymore. Data that exists, that is not particularly controversial. It's not being presented as though it is somehow indicative of the necessity for bias or indicative of some substantiated bias. It is simply unacceptable to say that I'm born a man and therefore I'm vastly more at risk for male pattern baldness. That's a thing. I'm bald, folks. I am so bald that when my hairline started running away, you could tell I was French, okay? That's how bald I am. That is something that is associated with having an outie for a genital. It's kind of a thing that happens. You're a guy, there's some risk that you could have male pattern baldness. Holy shit, who'd have fucking thunk it? And strangely enough, bear with me here. If you're born with any genitals, crazy thought that this is, reasonable chance you've got ovaries. Pretty sure that I'm not going to have ovarian cancer, but I'm pretty sure that a person that is born with ovaries might run a risk of ovarian cancer. Crazy as fuck, ain't it, folks?